The webcast is going out. This is going out on the webcast, so welcome to anyone that's watching it live or those that choose to catch up later on. We're not expecting a fire alarm, so if one does go off, we will need to evacuate. So we go out the quickest way is to go out the main front door in which we came, and then we gather down by the cathedral. And so agenda item 2 is apologies for absence and substitutions. So Councillor Mohammed has sent his apologies, and we have Councillor Van is substituting for him. And I note that everybody else that was due to arrive has duly arrived. So shall we go round and introduce ourselves as committee? I am Councillor Townsend, and I am the chair of the Children and Young People's Committee.
I'm Councillor Katja Hanshin, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Children and Young People's Committee.
Hi, I'm Sue Collar, and I am Councillor for Bishopsworth.
Cara Levan, Councillor for St George Central, substituting on this committee.
Shona Gentry, Councillor for Lawrence Hill.
Ellie Freeman, Councillor for Bedminster.
John Glanders, Councillor for Stoke Bishop.
Andrew Varney, Councillor for Brislington West.
Councillor Kerry Bales, Hartcliffe and Withywood.
And officers present.
Hannah Woodhouse, Director of Children's Services.
Hi, Fiona Tudge, Service Director for Children and Families.
Hi, I'm Gail Rogers, and I'm the Head of Children's Commissioning.
And to my left.
I'm Ian Hurd from Policy Committee team.
Okay, and there will be other officers obviously joining us to, but as and when their items come up on that agenda. Are there any declarations of interest from any of our council members relating to any areas of business on the agenda? Councillor Bales?
I'm a service user, so we're going to be discussing the homeschool transport. So I just wanted to say that my son uses the service, so just to be transparent.
Thank you. Any others? Okay, we take that as a no. Thank you very much. And that moves on to agenda item 4 is the minutes of the previous meeting. So these were held on the 26th of June. So, having read the minutes, I would record that they were a correct record. Have I got a seconder for that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 5 is...
Sorry, Jake, yours.
Are the committee happy and content to adopt the minutes? Yes, okay, thank you. And then agenda item 5 is the chair's announcements. So just to mention what's right at the bottom of the agenda on the website is that it's been a very short period of time since we had our last committee in terms of what it is that children and young people do during the summer, and we haven't had a quality and improvement and performance board. So the latest data that would have been the rest of that school term and over the summer, which obviously won't include school data, has yet to go to the quality and improvements and performance. But I think that one's next week, isn't it? We've got that, yeah. So we will be going back to our usual monitoring report for our next committee meeting. And the second announcement that I'd like to make is about the Holiday Activity Fund. So it was announced yesterday from the national government that there was going to be a funded extension for that. So the Holiday Activity Fund, as people may know, is the amount of funds that Bristol and other local authorities receive is based on our registered children that are entitled to free school meals. Part of the reason why we're really keen to make sure that we are capturing all children that are entitled to free school meals, because it has financial implications and it's used formula-based in Westminster to calculate other things that that might come into the city for our children. So that's partly why that's really important. But the Holiday Activity Fund throughout the summer, and I think tomorrow is probably the last day. So there's activities going on across the city, and that includes a meal for those children. And so it's really useful. It's really pleasing to see that the government has recognised the importance of that. And it also has some really good sort of foundations for the motion that we passed, the Labour motion that was passed about childcare and wraparound care and holiday activities, because it means that foundation that's already up and running, we know will be financed. And so I think that puts us in a better place than when that motion was passed, because we didn't know whether the government was going to be choosing to extend that funding. So that's really positive. And the third announcement is about the number of, this is quite a sensitive issue, but about the number of children aged 16 and 17 that are in unregistered accommodation. So in 2022, if a child was 16 or 17, the law changed so that they had to be registered with Ofsted. In May 24, when the administration changed, there were 14 children in such accommodation, and as of today there are 3, and those accommodations are also going through registration with Ofsted. These are small numbers, but I want to recognise and acknowledge the amount of work and the length of time it takes to get ourselves from the number that was 14 to where we are now. So I want to acknowledge that with children's social care, and I think that that will only continue to be a positive move for us, and we will welcome the day when I can come and say we haven't got any children that are in currently unregistered accommodation. It's a national issue. I'm sure that members and others may have seen all sorts of headlines about the sorts of accommodation in the past that children may have been put into, and it's reason why Ofsted is so important for children that are 16 and 17. Thank you. Okay, and that takes us on to the public forum. So we have 30 minutes for this, if need be. And we start with public questions. And we had 2 people submit public questions, and they submitted 3 each. So the written officer answers have been published on the website alongside those answers that were submitted to us. I can see that Jen Smith is not here, but if we start with Dan Ackroyd. Dan, you've got 2 follow-ups, if you wish to use both of those.
Just one, please.
Okay.
Supplementary question to my question about the software and robotising of the process. It seems wrong that each council is being left to figure out the details of a very bespoke piece of software needed to support handling EHCP plans in compliance with the relevant data protection laws. Is there not a national body like the LGA that helps coordinate councils developing these bespoke pieces of software?
Yeah, thanks. And I think, I mean, as we said in the answer, it's work that obviously we do need to continue to develop as using software to be able to automate processes that can sensibly be automated and safely be automated. So it is work that we're doing. And we are working across, because obviously one of the sort of questions is about interface with our own systems. Each local authority uses different systems, as well as with the health systems, for example. In this situation, we are working across the ICB footprint with the other local authorities on what they're doing around automation of processes like the development of EHCPs. So, and we'll continue to do that. I don't think there is an LGA group, but I will look into it, Dan, and happy to get back to you.
Thank you.
And what I'd add to that, Dan, is that we are awaiting the national government's reforms on SEND. And it will be interesting to see whether that is purely about as much about practice as it is about actual backroom data collection and the ability for staff to automate things so that they have more time to spend with children and families and doing the kind of the human work, if you like, rather than the tech work. But I think it's a good question, but it's not an area that is a tech question really, with a EHCP context rather than the other way around.
Well, I am a techie, so sure.
Oh, okay. Do you have a second question?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we also had 3 public statements. I'm aware that Councillor Graham Morris hasn't indicated that he's coming, but Jen is not here. So, Dan, did you want to speak to your statement?
Yeah, quite briefly. I have very little trust in the capability of politicians holding officers to account at this council. I lack faith that this committee is going to vote for a real inquiry that actually gets carried out and actually reports the facts of what happened. I suspect it either won't happen because it needs to be funded or some other rule will be found to unfortunately block the inquiry. You really need to make sure that this is set up in a way that it doesn't get messed with. I hope to be proved wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. And as Jen is not here, I'm going to close public forum and move on to agenda item number 7. And so we are welcoming 2 outside guests. So Samira and Tom, welcome to the Children and Young People's Committee. And they are going to talk to us about a piece of research that's been carried out under the guise of the University of Bristol. This is for information for us. And I'd like to invite Samira and Tom to do your introductions. Thank you.
Brilliant. Does that work with the... Yeah, can you hear me? Fantastic. Thank you so much for the invitation and the opportunity. I'm Tom Allport. I'm a community paediatrician and a researcher, so I'm bringing 2 hats of health service and university. And I've been working in Bristol since 2003 and in inner city in East Bristol since 2006. So this work comes from a kind of long experience of meeting families whose kids whose parents have travelled from all over the world and thinking, how do you do bringing up children in Bristol and what lessons can we learn? So what is it like if you come from a culture where it takes a village to raise a child here in our atomised, fragmented society, and quite a lot of challenges along the way. And so the partnership that Samira and I have worked together for well more than 10 years and amongst a good number of others, but it's a lovely opportunity to tell you some of that.
Hello. Hi, my name is Samira Muse. I'm one of the co-founders and directors of Barton Hill Activity Club. As Tom said, we've been working together for the last 10 years with a project called Find Your Village in Barton Hill and surroundings.
So we'd like to tell you a bit about the story of that kind of journey of understanding and advocacy, and ask some questions about how the Children and Young People's Committee might want to use those ideas, really. We've had really constructive conversations with Shona recently about the interface between children and young people and housing, and that's one really beautiful, challenging topic to think more about, and we'd be interested to think with you. There would be examples in terms of education, in terms of safety, in terms of digital poverty, in terms of green spaces, in terms of inclusion, in terms of health. And I guess the number one question is, how does the Children and Young People's Committee get bite into the other functions of the council to say, are they working in a way that's children and young people friendly? And does the kind of Find Your Village set of ideas, is that interesting and helpful to how you might do that? And then our other questions are around commissioning or procurement and around consultation. So those are the sort of things that we'd love to have a conversation. Is that interesting to have a dialogue a bit today? And if there's things that you want to continue a conversation, we'd be really interested in that. So that's the sort of preamble. I guess I want to try and give you an example to flesh out something that really impacted. And this is mostly one story, but it's a bit collected together to make it anonymous. I met a family where there was a 2-3-year-old who had Somali heritage, and his development was really delayed, and he was really struggling with learning to play and to connect with other children and to join in and to pay attention and to lots of aspects of learning, kind of his social emotional development, his cognitive development, his language development were in real difficult situation. And his dad told me a story. He was the middle of 3 children, and the first child was born in a tab lock in a really in a very majority white part of Bristol, and they didn't feel comfortable and welcome and didn't feel easily able to go out of the home. And then when the kids started in school, it felt a sort of not confident, not really welcomed experience. And their daughter had lots of emotional challenges in confidence and attending school and getting in trouble. And that was a really difficult journey. And they consulted mental health CAMS colleagues, and that helped something. But that had been really difficult. And then this child, they'd been rehoused to a big tab lock in Lawrence Hill, and that had felt very multicultural, and in that way more confident. But people, the behaviour in and outside the block felt really complicated. People would pee in the lifts, and people would behave strangely on the front door, and they didn't know if they were mad or on substances or a danger to others. And there was quite a well-made play park, but it didn't have any gates. And at that time, there'd been lots and lots of publicity in the news about a child of the same age as their older one having been abducted, and that was all over the press every day for 6-9 months really. And that sense of, I don't know how much danger does that mean for me? And the combination of that and the sense that anybody could walk into the park in any second if your back is turned, the sort of sense of threat that produced was really huge. And then by the time I met them, they'd been moved to a small tab lock in Redcliffe, and that had just 6 floors and just 6 flats on each floor, and there was a bit of communal space at the end of the corridor with, I think, a washing machine. And that meant they could meet their neighbours and talk to the neighbours. And there was a little play park which had gates, and that meant that they could take turns, and the neighbours would take the kids to the park, and suddenly the couple had a bit of downtime to kind of get their act together. And their third child was developing typically. And so the dad's story was really clear that where we lived mattered hugely for how our child would grow up. And I think the emerging understanding of how pregnancy and early life sets the scene for children's development really fits with that. There's a field of epigenetics that is one of the most powerful of my kind of research feeds about how our genes and our environment interact. And so learning from that, I think that is obviously just one example, but I think it tells a lot of a story. So our meeting, you responded, or I hugely appreciated your setting up the activity club, and I don't know if you want to speak a bit about that.
Yeah, I met Tom through another colleague from the community, one of the community leaders in Barton Hill, Abdullahi, and when he proposed this idea, it was like, oh, you're talking about my childhood. I'm from a place where it takes a village to raise a child. We just used to go out, play with the children, and have that interacts with the community. And when he came up with the idea, I was like, this is exactly what our children need. So with that, back of that, we set up the activity club in 2018. We've been going since now. We have, can't even remember, I think about 2,000 members now. We take the groups to trips outside the city. We did social prescribing, trial out with different, age groups, to grandparents, to young children. And then it's just the community feels more connected. Before that, we didn't have any connections with anyone else. I used to take my children to the children's center, and then we moved to that from school, and it was just you and your child. There's no community connection. There was no, children playing outside in the parks. Our parks were run down. So me and Tom campaigned the, urban park to be renewed, our tower blocks, wherever we have a problem. We just look at the eyes of the family and say, okay, with, our leaders, I use a lot of examples, like our leaders, they wouldn't live like this. So we use that a little bit, and then we met few very high, people who are really high in the council, in our tower blocks. I live in a corporate house, and we've been rewarded 3 million to renew it. And through that has been kind of example. Now Barton Hill has a lot of other flats that is having the same, they have the same problems, but they having the same opportunity to have the building renewed, because that was the start of something. So as Tom said earlier, it takes a village to raise a child. We need, as a city, to look after our children. It doesn't matter what color, what background you're from. They children, they need to have a good start in life, and that's where our activities starts from. So we give the opportunity to the mothers from pregnancy to children growing up. They grow with us. We have children who, when we started, they was 4 or 5 years old. Now they finish in secondary school. We celebrate with them with that milestone, and do activity with them and take them out and treat them as well with the achievement they have. And we're supporting them through the university. Now we have a coffee morning where the parents come. They will come out with a form and say, I need my child university, application help. So we see the children grow. So, as a city, we need that kind of things. Yeah.
So there's lots of layers to this. We've got lots of research evidence that's around qualitative interviews, ethnographic observations, combining visual methods of learning and questioning. The walkabouts that I think we've done have been super interesting, sharing eyes between children and parents and city staff and health staff and academic staff and voluntary sector staff in small groups, critiquing opportunities for play and interaction for children and young children and their parents, and thinking about what are good examples where something's working well, what are bad examples where it's not feeling inclusive or safe, where are the opportunities for change. And the councillors a few years back have absolutely loved that and put a total of 840,000 of community infrastructure levy money into improving the parks and green spaces. And the Barton Hill Urban Park is totally transformed by that process. Netham Park's on the beginning of a journey and offers huge opportunities. Newtown Park's had some really good work. But these are drop in the ocean in a sense, but I think the messages around working together to share eyes and to think about the interaction between study and change are really interesting, I hope. And so on the Find Your Village as an idea is sort of 2 layers to it. There's a kind of thinking about, well, I think it all comes through thinking about community connectedness and social support as a mechanism of change, that is a way to bring well-being and opportunities and confident development and life chances, I suppose, that really cuts across, I think we're really aware about how social isolation and loneliness makes a difference in a health hat. That's incredibly obvious at all ages of life stages, but I think I'm trying to argue the centrality of social connectedness and social support, and then the quickest, most effective way to achieve change in that way, I think, is an idea of peer support. So can community members support people like themselves? That's the stories from interviewing mothers in Bristol, comparing and contrasting childhood in Somalia and childhood in Bristol, which you'd be fascinated and maybe not surprised about not favouring Bristol, but how if you've got a government agency that you don't know about, someone will go with you and help translate that agency in a way that can make sense to you. And I think that's the sort of thing that Samira is describing so eloquently about how to transform the sense of, oh, I don't get this, to, oh, I can handle this, how to demystify, to detoxify the urban myths that shut all of us up so much. You know, for years there was a urban myth for Somali families that if you go to the airport, social services will take your children away because they think you're about to have them cut. And that, you know, that's gone a long way to detoxifying. But those sort of, you know, there are urban myths that affect all of us, and which kinds of fear stories, children's freedom to roam has reduced dramatically in recent generations. And I think hearing from the strengths of communities where kids can still play out, and if they get lost, someone will bring them home, that kind of shared confidence. I think there's a huge amount that us as host communities can reclaim about more communal collective childhoods, I suppose, and parenting. So our questions are, and we've.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
No. Well, I'm interested to hear whether any of our committee members have got any questions or comments on what you've presented us. Councillor Varney and then Councillor Hornchin, and then just catch my eye. And
Thank you, Christine. Yeah, Tom and Samira, I just really enjoyed reading your support. It's a really lovely project, and it's incredible to see what difference it's made. And I just hope it can be expanded to other parts of our city as well. And I'm sure members have seen this, but I just wanted to add there's a lovely video as well. It's about 5 or 6 minutes long. Definitely worth having a look at the video because it tells the story so well. So thank you very much for coming today.
Katja?
I really loved your presentation. I loved reading your work and watching the video, and I can really relate because I used to work a lot with Somali communities as well and other communities as a play worker, and so it really resonates with me. Children do, and I did research on roaming, children being able to roam, and they just don't have the roaming things that my generation had, for instance, and being also not quite as mixed heritage as some people are, but I was brought up in different countries and my parents were German, so there are differences with parenting and that's also quite interesting. I'm fascinated about that sort of thing. But one of the things I'd really love is if you could try to get our planners to really listen to how important it is that they build communities with spaces for children, older children, younger children and teenagers, because so much of our problems come because we just totally disregard them. I mean, the space for a room for a child, the legal space for a room for a child is 2-3 square meters, which is like a single bed and a little cupboard. I mean, how does a child meant to thrive in there? They can't grow or thrive, and children have a habit of growing. Don't know, but they do. Thanks. Thank you very much.
And Shona?
Yeah, thanks for bringing this. As one of the councillors for Lawrence Hill, I see a bit of this, but it's so much more powerful for you guys to come and tell us in person about some of these children who risk being some of the most left behind children in our city. And I think particularly at a time when there's so much racist rhetoric flying around the country, I think it's really important to remember and commit to this sense of community and what you describe. One reason that I wanted you to come present it now rather than later in the year is that the sanctuary strategy is just about to go out for consultation, and I want to ask the colleagues who are writing the sanctuary strategy to really look at this and try and embed more of it into the strategy, particularly around whether there is any potential to resource these community groups and leaders more, because a lot of them are doing it, like funding, a lot of you are funding it yourselves or doing massive hours of unpaid work, and there's only a limit to how much that can do, as well as asking colleagues in children's services to try and have that more integrated, to see how we can integrate this work more, because to try and tackle some of those fears and that stigma and that lack of understanding, maybe from some professionals as well, because I think, the quotes that you bring forward and the sort of stories that you describe are really powerful and a real testament. And that's what we all say is that we want this community, we want everyone to, that's what we teach our children, is that everyone's working together and everyone looks out for each other. So challenging ourselves to find ways to embed that more practically. So that's, I think, what I would want to take away from this is to ask those colleagues who are doing the sanctuary strategy, and I know there's a consultation people can fill in formally as well, and I would encourage people to fill in formally, but to try and weave more of what you've talked about in your report into the sanctuary strategy to embed it more. But thank you both very much for taking the time to come and talk to us and taking more hours out of your day on this.
Thank you so much. Sorry, is it possible to respond?
Yeah, go ahead. Did you have some questions for us as a... Yeah,
yeah.
So I'll ask, Ian will record them and then maybe we can respond to them, because we probably won't be able to respond immediately. We'd have to,
I think I'm hoping that the Children and Young People's Committee has mechanisms about oversight or engagement with the other committees. You know, there's a powerful change of the way the council runs to committee-based practice, and how, you know, that we would have examples to share about education, about safety, about digital poverty, about housing, you know, really, really appreciated, shown as advocacy for, so that the bottom of each tower block, there's often a community room, and since COVID, the keys were all taken away. And so communities generally can't meet in their community rooms. And so hopefully, I don't know exactly where that's got to, but getting those reopened and trusted local leaders having copies of the keys, you know, is just a small, I think there's so much play potential in the landscape at the bottom of tower blocks, so Bristol City housing responsibility, but there are constituencies of drivers and fear about behaviour. You know, I've suggested that play equipment needs seating for the parents to feel safe, but that's fearful for the residents in case people use the seats for things they don't want. And so how could we help consult in a ways that would help make those safe? That would be a super local example. Green spaces we've talked a bit about. Health and place, I guess. How do place and health, how can the council step into a place where health monies can help? You know, I know the group parks and green spaces department are really keen to trigger more health money to come in, but for the well-being of children, I think your committee might want to be sticking your nose into helping make those wheels turn, those kind of things. Green space partnerships, so that parts of, you know, there's a bit, the councillors have fenced off a bit of Netham Park to be played in, but how can we actually get action to do low-key, you know, things that don't require metal and long 5-year lead times to get them to happen? You know, that just, anyway, so joined up functions in relation to that. And then my second question is around commissioning and procurement, and I think our messages are that funding through community groups is an incredibly powerful and really value for money way of doing things, but it's really difficult where the trust is ruptured by short-term, unpredictable starting and finishing contracts, and that demand evaluation that's not in a co-produced, you know, collaborative, making sure that it's asking the questions and it's from groups that don't have the resources to do evaluations because they've only just got started, and they don't want to be asking questions of community members who have just come out of their house for the first time. Can you just do a baseline questionnaire is a really problematic thing. So how to do that. And then the third question is around consultations. And, you know, there are examples that we could share about local interventions that have felt really, really out of keeping and out of alignment with the communities. And how, you know, online consultations is a really difficult thing for people whose first language isn't English. And so what creative thoughts might the council wish to do to try and be inclusive about the way consultations? And would you like... We're in partnership with the Family Hub service and providing a kind of local consultancy for their inclusiveness and breadth of offer, and that's offering a really beautiful kind of just the beginnings of something really interesting.
Thank you very much. I mean, the three questions are they're very key questions, and they're kind of high on, you know, they're on our minds. I think what I would say is in relation to putting children and families at the front and centre of what we do, the corporate strategy now has children and families at the front. It's number one on the list. That's kind of, it's a headline. The bits about I agree with you about around the consultation. It is, I mean, I'm sure my colleagues would agree, whenever we are briefed about a consultation that will go out, there will always be a question around, well, what happens if you haven't got A, access to the internet, or B, you may not be able to read what it is that's printed on the paper. So what are the other ways in which those consultations, how are you going to, and you know, it's phrases like, people that are seldom heard and things, you know, those are that's the sort of language that would be used, but it's actually, the methods are the methods and they don't change from day to day. And the third question, there was one around procurement, and I did make a note. So one of the things that has changed under the new since the Labour government came in, is that councils will have a 3-year financial settlement. So for a number of years, up until 2024, we knew what the council would know what next year's budget was, and that was it. And I recognise that there are, particularly community and smaller organisations, they just don't have that capacity that the bigger organisations might do, so that they're able to kind of engage or cover the periods where they might be waiting for, you know, whatever the funder is, you know, as a council, we're waiting for what next year's budget might have been. So that's it's a positive step from our perspective. But what I don't think it will do is mean that there won't be pots of money that come down from Westminster that have quite a short time frame on them. So whilst things, I do think it will be better once we get a 3-year settlement, because we'll be able to be in a position to be able to plan a bit better and a bit more longer term. But yeah, there are constraints around, I suppose, how councils are funded in that way, that is subject to national legislation, and that's kind of just where we are, really. I'm just
pushing back to national government about how trust building, you know, I think the government wants to work in terms of neighbourhood, you know, this is really close to the heart of central government, but is it going to be operationalised? So I think Bristol's got an amazing kind of lineage of just opening and challenging and being on the front foot of a lot of this stuff, and pushing it back to, you know, having messages to central office about ways in which that the whole country can learn from some of the stuff that Bristol does is really valuable. And I think push back about commissioning systems, and if you just, you know, if we have to, is really visible in the health system as well. You know, you've got 3 months to compete for a year's worth of money, and then it's non-recurrent, or you have to compete again and another authority gets that money. That's so trust rupturing for communities who are marginalised and uncertain about. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just looking to see if any of my committee members have got any final comments. Shona, and then Susan, and then we'll move on. Thanks.
Yeah, it was only about the community rooms, in that I believe needs to be like fire risk assessments updated and electrical equipment PAT tested. So we should be getting an update on that imminently. I'll be chasing next week. But that's a really good example of like where the different committees can work together, and where one chair can talk to another chair, and how that interlinks, because the number of people who say, like, you know, who want to use the community rooms for things like children's birthday parties or funerals or events, but have to book it, you know, weeks in advance, and it can only be during working hours, is just not feasible for families. And that is a really good example of what you say, you need that community space. So that's a really good example that you've given about how the different areas of the council need to work together, and that's something that I know we can chase up further and take forward.
And Susan?
I was just interested in when you were saying about using community groups and stuff like that. So going back 30 years ago, I actually became isolated in my own area, the area I grew up in. I became isolated because I had a baby. And as a baby, as a mother with her first child, I didn't know where to go, what support was out there or anything like that. And then I managed to find Bernardo's Fulford Family Centre. And that for me changed everything. And it didn't just enable me to be effective as a mother, it actually helped me become effective as a member of my community. So I think that using community groups and widening that kind of like what is going on in your community and having access for families with young children, even within their areas, their own areas, enabling families to have that kind of longitudinal kind of like ongoing process of support for families. And the friends that I made then 30 years ago are still my friends now, that we met at children groups and stuff like that. So raising our children together, that kind of whole community, you know, and it was, you know, across the whole area. But I think anything that enables parents to be as good as a parent as they can be with that additional support in that kind of area, but also to develop them as parents and members of their community, and how they can be developed, what resources and accessibility that they have to just become more than what they could be or are growing up in areas, especially in areas of deprivation, where there isn't always enough for families. So it's just, that community is brilliant.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to close by saying thank you very much for coming and sharing your report with us, and giving us your time to have that conversation with us. And we've noted some of those questions, so there will be probably a bit more that can be padded out around that, including how, as committees, we work across, as well as within those areas that we've got specific responsibilities for. And we think about people and not things, rather than, yeah. Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so that takes us on to agenda item update, which is the update on the concerns about social media use. And so I'm going to invite Hannah to introduce and outline the paper.
Thank you. So, as Councillor Townsend said, we haven't got a Children and Young People's Update report this time, but we will have one next time. So what we have got instead is a report on the discussion around the inappropriate social media use by council staff. And this is an issue that came up in your last committee meeting. And so and we've got a report, and I don't really want to say very much more than what is in the report, to be honest, but just a few things to sort of preface it. One is to recognise that this is a really difficult and painful conversation for many. And I really recognise that. In the report, it outlines the history that in 2021-22, there was concerns about officer use of social media raised by both the Chief Exec and the previous Scrutiny Committee, which were investigated and published, and anyone can read that report, which is included in the paper. There has been ongoing concern, as we know, since about whether the investigation covered the ground it needed. Oh, sorry, can you hear me? There's been concern about whether the investigation covered the ground it needed since that, and that's what was discussed in the last committee. There was a golden motion at the time to do an external investigation, which wasn't taken forward under the previous administration. And so we really recognise the ongoing concerns and also the need to build trust and move forward with this issue. And I think that has been expressed by everybody. And so we're bringing two options today. We're bringing option number one, which is to ask which is proposing that we commission an external investigator to set out, as the report says, to set out the terms of reference with input from the committee, or to not do anything, is option number two. There is also an amendment, which you know, we will come to. I did just want to say before we start, you start discussing this, that the paper does set out that improving outcomes for SEND children is a huge priority for us. We know that we've got lots of work to do. We are doing that work. We've talked about that at every committee that you've had. And also that our partnerships are a lot better than they were at the time. They still obviously always can be improved, and I recognise that things take time to improve, and particularly relationships do, but they are in a significantly different place, and I hope that the report sets that out clearly. So I think that's all that we wanted to say, and over to you.
Okay, thank you. So as Hannah's just informed us, we've had an amendment from Councillor Bales, which has been published and shared with yourselves. In order for to consider the amendment, option 1 needs to be moved and then seconded, because the amendment directly relates to option 1. So I propose that we move option 1, and I can see that Councillor Andrew Varney has seconded it. Thank you very much. And so that takes us on then to the amendment itself. So I will hand over to Councillor Bales to move her amendment.
Do we read it out? Or what do I...
Talk to it, maybe.
Oh, yes, so do you want me to read it out? Because it's published, or do I just speak?
No, just move. You need to say you're moving your amendment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay.
I'll move in my amendment.
Okay, thank you. And so there needs to be a seconder for that amendment. So Councillor Susan Connor has seconded that amendment. Thank you very much. So Councillor Bell's amendments has been moved and seconded. So that means that we then move on to the fourth bit of this procedure, which is to invite the officer perspective from the professional perspective on the amendment that was been submitted.
Thank you. So just to welcome the input and the suggestions, which obviously have had a lot of thought and include a lot of content which are really helpful and are really well considered. I think that the only concern from the sort of officer perspective, the main concern from the officer perspective, is that there are significant financial implications in the amendment, both in terms of resource as well as implications of the report, as well as policy implications. And so it's such that it may not have been allowable, but we did want to we're keen on transparency, we're keen on obviously contributions from the committee, the conversation that we've had. So our comment is that we were happy for it to be debated, but we do need to understand that it's on the basis that we are concerned about the potential financial implications. It's not been costed. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And so then with the next part of this procedure, as we move on and as members we are able to debate this or ask questions. So Councillor Bales, do you want to do an introduction to your amendment, or are you happy for questions and debate and comments to come forward?
I'm happy to go straight to questions.
Oh, okay, right. So I saw Councillor Varney. So please indicate to me, and I will go around. I'll try and make sure I include you. Councillor Varney, off you go. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christine. So almost 3 years ago, I was in this room when we had the Golden Motion debate, and I voted for an investigation into the allegations at that point. And it's very disappointing that investigation did not take place at that time, because I think now, almost 3 years later, it might be harder to get to the truth of the matter. So that's really unfortunate. But, we've also heard about the expense as well. I am concerned that this investigation, if we approve it, is going to be expensive, and money will be coming from the SEND budget, which we can ill afford to spend on other things. But We did have a vote in full council. I'm not in the habit of ignoring votes in full council. So on that basis, I will be supporting option 1. I thank Councillor Bells for her amendment, but I think it's a little bit premature. I think firstly we need to decide whether or not we're going to have the investigation. Then we need to appoint a lead person to carry out the investigation, an independent person. And we need to probably, I would imagine, discuss the terms and conditions, the terms of reference, I should say, with that appointee. And then I believe the proposed terms of reference will be coming back to a future committee. At that point, I think that would be the appropriate time to debate the terms of reference and perhaps to put amendments at that time. I think probably at this point it's a bit premature. Also, Councillor Bell says one thing I didn't quite like about your terms of reference, no offence, but it didn't mention anything about politicians at the time. And I think, you know, we can't just have an investigation that focuses only on council officers. I think it's potentially the case that politicians may have known what was going on. And if we really want to get to the bottom of this and put this issue to bed, we do need to invite politicians at the time to give evidence if they wish. Of course, that's the issue, isn't it? We can't compel anyone to give evidence. So we might never completely get to the bottom of this, and it will leave a lot of people unsatisfied, and we would have spent a lot of money as well. But we had a vote in full council 3 years ago. It was ignored by the previous administration. I don't want to ignore it today, so I support having an investigation. Thank you very much.
Councillor Glanders.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies if this sounds a bit of a repeat of what Councillor Varney has said, but I think it is important that I set out my views on this. The external independent investigation should have been carried out in 2022. That was the wish of full council, that the administration, and it was a mayoral administration, that one man or the team, whatever you want to call it, blocked that vote of full council, ignored the democratic wish of full council, is disgraceful, shameful. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've got rid of an appalling system. And I hope we never, ever go back to that mayoral system, which was such a blot and a stain on Bristol's civic character. So it should have been done in 2022. In 2025, it's going to be much harder. And I think we're going to have to be very careful with the terms of reference, because otherwise we could end up spending a huge amount of money on this. And it's money that comes out of the SEND budget, of course. So we do have to be very, very careful with what we spend. The terms of reference will have to be tightly drawn. But we do need that investigation. I have spoken to officers, and I know that they're concerned that the investigation wasn't carried out. I know parents and residents are unhappy that it wasn't carried out. It will forever be a problem, I think, unless we actually do something. So option 1, I'm happy to support. The amendment, I'm not happy to support.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Bales?
So just to come back on a few points, my terms of reference have been sense checked by parent carers, so I think it's really important to have them involved. So if officers decide on the terms of reference, obviously they're not going to be involved in that, not specifically as they have been with mine. So I think to build on the trust, they have to be involved at every level. And I didn't vote for or against, I didn't vote at all, I didn't abstain on the original motion, so it's quite concerning that 3 years later it hasn't happened. And the reason it didn't happen under us is because, as Christine said last time, there was legal action. So, nobody could move forward until that legal action had ended. So, I think my terms of reference would build trust with parent carers, because we have waited a very long time. And, I think whoever was involved, it would give us an answer. It would give us all closure, whether, it was done for whatever reason. We need closure on this. I think everybody needs closure, because otherwise we're just going to keep talking about this and talking about it forever and ever and ever. And, this has not only had an impact on us as parent carers, it's impacted on our children. So I think, we have to think about them as well. This has been going on for years and years and years. And, our children are also growing up with this over their heads.
And Councillor Van?
Is there any reason why the motion as proposed can't involve parent carers in setting up terms of reference? Is there still opportunity for them to be involved as things stand? Was my first question. And then also you made it sound as if this is still ongoing, and is it still ongoing, and is there evidence that it's still ongoing?
The longer this goes on, the more suspicion is raised, which is why we need closure. So an investigation, it would find out that. So in my terms of reference, it says when concerns were first raised, right up until now. So if whether it has or hasn't been going on, you know, a continuation, an investigation would find out. You know, as parent carers, some of them want to remain anonymous, so I can't speak on their experience without identifying them. So with an investigation, they could remain anonymous. They could speak to the investigator, and whatever they disclose, whether it's historic or recent, that would be investigated.
But you don't know of any evidence that it's ongoing, because the report says that it's the culture has changed now. And do you believe the culture has changed?
Well, I was somebody that was spied on, so it's not really. I don't really want to give any information at a public forum.
I mean, we're not supposed to be having an investigation here and now, so I think we should leave that to, if we decide to vote for investigation, we should leave that to the experts. But, you know, we just need to decide how we're going to vote. So.
Okay. Sorry, Shona.
Yeah, I was only going to say that, I agree. I think it's really important to have an investigation and try and settle this as much as we can. I think there's a lot of good stuff in the terms of reference. I think there is stuff that I would like changed. As someone mentioned, it doesn't mention any of the politicians involved at the time, and that will surely be quite a key part of it. So, and you know, I would hope that, I note that the original recommendation says that the terms of reference would be developed in consultation with us as committee members. So I would hope that a lot of these terms of reference could be brought into it, but I don't feel comfortable voting for it as it is now, considering I only saw it like yesterday. I wish we'd had this conversation a couple of weeks ago to kind of being able to thresh it out and get to a stage today where it was something we were all happy with. I think there's also like that balance. We don't know the exact cost of it. My understanding is that to do an investigation up to the present day is likely to be far more expensive than if we do an investigation around the period where we know there's concerns. And so I suppose we have to justify, if we're going to spend a lot of money bringing it up to the present day, we have to have like reasonable confidence. We have to have some sort of reason for that to, I suppose my concern is that we don't seem to have any evidence to justify that at the moment, and that's my concern. I would love if we had enough money to just do it all and then we could all put it to bed and we never have to think about this again, but I don't feel comfortable authorising that amount of money when, from what we understand, it comes out of the SEND budget anyway. But I would really hope that we could have some follow-up discussions as soon as possible, and that most of these terms of reference could be brought into whatever the final decision is made, is my view.
Councillor Collar.
I can't speak from personal experience. It didn't happen to me. But I think as a parent, I know how I would feel if that had happened to me. And I believe that anyone out there that has that hanging over their head, that they were treated the way that it is reported, that we should be looking back and saying what happened, what went wrong, and how can we stop it from ever happening again. So for me, obviously, I'm going to support us doing the investigation purely because it's more about prevention as well as looking back into what happened. But if we know that something was wrong, we need to fix it, we need to move on, and we need to learn and make sure that that doesn't happen again. And only finding out the truth of what happened can we actually move forward. So that's why I'm going to kind of say yes to an investigation.
And Councillor Freeman.
I think people have covered a lot of what I was going to say, and I think, I'm with everybody else on this, that we obviously need to have it. I don't think there was really a question about whether we were going to have an investigation. It's how we frame that and how we make sure that the costs don't spiral, that we have a very clear scope, and we're very clear about where we draw the line, so that it doesn't creep and we don't eat into our very precious SEND budget. I think the other aspect that I wanted to raise is as an SDN parent, I've not had much to do with the Parent Carers Forum. I know that they're a brilliant advocate and a brilliant organisation, but obviously there are other stakeholders who might have an interest here, and we talk quite a lot about the Parent Carers Forum. Are there other SEN parents who perhaps aren't being heard in this debate? Can we make sure that if we are looking at parents and you know, that we are not just relying on the Parent Carers Forum to kind of represent that voice, that we are making sure that we are very clear about who we are including and why, I suppose. And I agree with Shona. I think there's some great bits in this terms of reference. I think there's other bits that we need to work on a bit more and discuss a bit more, and we need to make sure they're really tight and that we're confident that they're feasible as well, that they are, that they fit within a legal framework, that they are realistic, and they actually will feed into an investigation that happens, because otherwise we will keep going around in circles and not getting anywhere. And I agree with what everybody said, that we need to progress this, and we then need to put it to bed, because we can't afford to spend more officers' time, our time, or funding on this in the future. Okay, so doesn't appear that anybody else wishes to comment on this. I mean, I think that I echo particularly a lot of what Councillor Varney was saying. I agree with you. I don't. In some ways, these are very wide, but they're also too narrow. There certainly a term of reference in here needs to look at members of the previous administration alongside also political appointees that may have worked with that administration. I need to reiterate, such an investigation does not have any legal powers. So anybody that is contributing from outside of the organisation is doing so on a voluntary basis. And so therefore we would be looking towards the Bristol Labour Party colleagues to ensure that those members of the administration that were relevant to this, or political appointees that were relevant to this, it's going to be on you guys to get that engagement from them, because if that is not forthcoming, we're not going to get as full a picture as is possible as it will be possible to get. I agree. I mean, 3 years has passed. There will be people that have left the organisation that will choose not to engage. So in some ways, it will be an incomplete jigsaw, regardless, because that's just the situation that we now find ourselves in, and there isn't anything that we as a committee can do about that. So I'm going to ask. We're moving on to a vote. Is that right? Yeah. Sorry, so I'm just doing procedure stuff now.
The next stage will be a vote on Councillor Bell's.
Yeah. Okay. So. Yep, so we're on to number 5. So what we are now, I'm now going to ask you to vote on is the proposed amendment that Councillor Bales sent to us yesterday. So option 1 has been opened so that we are able to talk about the amendment. So it is literally just the bit about the amendment, and it's a straightforward for, against, or abstention. So I'm going to ask members of the committee that are for adopting these terms of reference and the other comments into option 1 to please raise their hands. Okay. So we've got Councillor Hernchen, Councillor Collett and Councillor Bales. So that's 3 for adopting the amendment. And those that are against adopting at this present time? So that's the 6 of us.
Yes, so the amendment is lost.
So the amendment falls, okay. Right.
So just to clarify, with the amendment being lost, we now move to a vote on the original option 1 as per the report.
Okay. Okay, so we now need to, we're now voting on the original 2 options put forward in the paper then. So can I have a raise of...
Just option 1 to start with.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, so we're going to look option 1. So those in favour of option 1, please raise your hands. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And then that takes us on to, we move on to agenda item number 9, which is the NEET reduction and youth guarantee report, NEET meaning not in education, employment or training. And that is for Jane Taylor to do the introductions. Jane, I want to just clarify with you, is this the same paper that went to Economy and Skills a couple of weeks ago? Or bits of it?
It was, it went to a agenda briefing. It hasn't actually been to the committee.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you please introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is a report for information. It's a follow-up report, and if you remember, I was here maybe 6 months ago, and this is now just giving you that update on our NEET performance. Obviously, the disengagement of young people 16 to 21 from education, training and employment is a growing concern with government, as it is here in Bristol, because what's happening here is happening everywhere. And so what the paper outlines is where have we got to, and what are the issues, and what are we doing about it. So just to summarise some of that, when we look at the data, we can see amongst 15-year-olds in the city, there's 373 using our family at risk data that we can see are at risk of not making a positive pathway at 16. And those who are 16, 17, we've got nearly 700 who are not in education, training or employment. And we have 2,235 18 to 24-year-olds who are receiving unemployment benefit. So that's a sizable number of young people that we should be worried about. That's a huge worry for them, for their families and for their communities, and it's a loss to the city and the economy. We're a fourth with our statistical neighbours, and the post-16 team have been doing a really, really great job, David Harrigan and his team. In June, our data is so good now, and that's come from the improved relationships with the schools and colleges and all of the providers. We've got really good records of where young people are at 16, 17. It's not easy. There are over 9,000 young people in that category. And there's a category called not known. If you don't know where the young people are, it's called not known. We got it down to 0.39%. That puts us in the top quintile, top performers. But there's a bit of a flip side to that, because if you now know where they are, your NEET numbers go up. But I guess if your NEET numbers are low, but you've got a high not known, that's a much worse position to be in. So what are the reasons for those numbers that are not engaged? Well, we can see that we can see it with our high non-attendance, that there is inconsistent inclusive practice in some of our settings. And even at post-16, we know that between January and March, there was a real spike in the number of students leaving their college course. So they made a successful jump when they left school, but they didn't last very long. And for those young people, there isn't an easy way back in, because courses tend to be full 2-year programs, and young people have to wait to get back into learning. So we need more entry level, level 1, roll on, roll off provision. We've got the perennial issue of transport in the city, which is expensive and inconsistent for young people. And they also, many young people lack the confidence to travel outside their immediate locality. And we know about the financial pressures that many families face. So what are we doing about this? There's a lot of work going on across the whole directorate. And that wider work is listed in the paper in relation to attendance, education, welfare, the school organisational strategy and plan, the work around SEND. But I really wanted just to mention some of that very targeted NEET reduction work that's being managed through my service. So we have the Bristol Works programme, which is providing experience of work for young people in school who are at risk of becoming NEET. And that's to get them switched into their motivation, why they need to do well at school and why they need to be at school, because we're giving them a clearer line of sight into positive employment and careers of the future. We've got our first money from the Combined Authority for NEET reduction, and starting next week, we've got our pilot 2-year NEET reduction programme. We've got some funding in there to work with 15-year-olds, most likely those who have not been attending or have very limited attendance. We're going to have one-to-one coaching, that relationship work. We're going to have workshops, and we're going to give them that experience of work and then hold their hands on their post-16 pathway. There's money in there to work with the 16, 17-year-olds and put that re-engagement provision in place. And finally, the youth guarantee. How is that going? Wow. I think in the paper I said there was something like 70 odd young people engaged. And I came back from my holiday and the team have been super busy over the summer. Any idea that somehow young people would disengage over the summer was, no, they're really, really wanting this. And I met some of the very excited members of the team earlier, and one of them said, we only had one young person who after lunch was disappearing, but we've dealt with that. So the team are absolutely the A team. We've got the right people. We've got a full team now. We've got all the coaches in place. We've got some great employers giving us work tasters, and I'd really like to come back another time to give you the full picture of that, because it only started in June. And the other thing, Christine doesn't know this yet, because Christine chairs the Youth Guarantee Board. There was an email sitting in my inbox to tell me that funding for year 2 is now confirmed. We have to go back to the Combined Authority with our ideas by the 12th of September, which isn't long away. But we have the right ideas. They're happening in South Bristol, and we just need to now roll that out across other parts of the city with high NEET. So that's the report, and I'm really happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to make a few comments, particularly around the kind of not known in the NEETs figures. So when children are of compulsory school age and then they're not doing any education, employment or training, we would call them children missing education. So those CME figures that we've been tracking, which is first and foremost really about the safeguarding role that we as a local authority hold for every child that is growing up in the city. So when a child becomes 16, if they're in that position, they then become known as a NEET child. But the not knowns would be the equivalent of the child missing education, the CME. And therefore, it was from a safeguarding perspective that the not known, those children, those young people that weren't known, we didn't know what they were doing, was then really focused and targeted on. And once you are in contact with a child, you're able, or a young person, you're better able then to engage them and obviously help them and support them back into and onto a pathway of their choosing that will hopefully enable them to fulfill their potential. So that is a really, I mean, it's a really positive thing, and I have never seen the numbers of not known as low as they currently are. So, and the CME figures will be coming, well, they might go up, it'll be in September because it's September, but we focused on CME for our first year, and that made a huge difference. And so we will continue to do that because it's a safeguarding role. And it's a bit more about the youth guarantee. Great news that we've got a second year of funding, and it speaks to what Tom and Samira were talking to us about earlier on, about short bits of funding. So it's very deliberate that we chose South Bristol around Hartcliffe and Fieldwood area, because those had really high numbers of children that would benefit from this. And we'll have to see, I suppose, as to whether that changes or not. I suppose it's kind of what happens really with what's going on this year and then into next year, and we make that decision a bit later down the line. But certainly one of the first questions when I chaired my first meeting was, we've got a year. By the time it's set up, we engage with the young people, we do a bit of work with them, and then you're almost coming to the end of it. So, and that is also not good for the staff team, because it's a very short period of time where staff are committing to work. So it's a really positive thing, and it gives us a bit more time to think about how we might carry on and kind of embed that. I suppose it is about giving all local authorities the opportunities to see what works, I suppose, so that they can then make it a sustainable sort of programme.
Yeah, and I think what I heard was the intention is that this is here now, so it'll go beyond 2 years.
Okay.
But it's kind of, we've got to now show what's working and learn from that.
Yeah, okay. So I'm handing, this is for a notice, so I'm going to hand over to, okay, so Kerry, Katja, Susan, Cara, and then anyone else catch my eye.
You said that 16 and 17-year-olds that aren't in employment are claiming benefits. I didn't write down the number you said, but do you know the breakdown of how many of them have SEND and have had EHCPs? Because from a parent carer's perspective, you know, we fight to get our children a decent education, and it costs us a lot of money, time, energy, and it's really draining. And then when they finally leave school, there's nothing. There's this big void, you know, there's no job, there's a lack of opportunity. So, you know, especially in my ward, you know, you could have a really techie kid that, you know, doesn't quite fit in at school and then tries their best and, you know, get to 16, 17, you think, well, what job is out there for this techie child? And where I live, it's scaffolding and things like that, you know, and it's the lack of opportunity. And for a child to then go and find something techie that they enjoy doing in a job, and there's also a transport barrier, because we might have improved the buses this year, but generally, since my ward was built in the 1950s, we haven't had great bus services. Just get my note. And, you know, it's also about profiling and things like that. So if, even at work experience level, I've been working with Merchants Academy and the university on a reverse work experience package, because even at that stage, when they're just thinking about options, they find it really difficult to get work placements. And that's just 1 week in their life. They have to go and find a work experience placement. And we've got hundreds and hundreds of businesses across the city that could and should step up, but quite often they don't. Sometimes it's a case of, you know, they have a policy in place where they have to be 18. Well, if they could take them for one day or just a morning or just an afternoon, you know, they could step up. You know, it does. You don't have to do a full week just in one setting. You know, work experience can be lots of things. So I think we really, really need to look at that. But yeah, just, you know, kids in my ward don't ever get the opportunity.
Yeah. Right, I'll take both of those. Engaging young people with special educational needs and disabled young people is an absolute priority of ours, and we've been leading the charge at a regional level through our We Work for Everyone programme, and also Bristol Works, that is providing this experience of work. We've pushed and pushed where we can to get funding so that we are providing that service in special schools and with young people within EHCP in mainstream settings as well. It's not enough, but we are keeping the pressure on in terms of raising that issue with the combined authority. And I think what we've realised this year, when we look at the numbers post-19 within EHCP, we could see a higher NEET level growing. We're very concerned. So what we've agreed to do is to sit down with our SEN colleagues, with the post-16 team, and also our post-19 community learning team and employment support, and basically work down every single person within EHCP to make sure they've got a plan and an offer. And what I think has happened is there's been such a focus on plans ceasing, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's a good progression. So we are going to look at even those that have a ceased plan. That's not enough information for me. I want to know exactly where they're going post-16, post-19, and also post-25. Because just because it finishes at 25, it's not okay that young person, they're still a young person, goes back to being at home not engaged. So we're just starting that casework approach, but I'm hoping that will result in perhaps more hand-holding into proper education, training and employment outcomes. And I think I talked about the work experience. We've got that in our sights. And here in the council, we offer a week of work experience, and the works team only prioritises young people who are at risk of not getting that opportunity. And I've always when young people with additional needs come and join my team, I always get to sit down with them as part of their week of work experience, and they teach me a lot. I had a young man this summer, and we sat together in a room up here, and he'd been doing some work with the team, and I said, so how are you feeling about working here at the college? And he said, sorry, at the council. And he said, oh no. No, I wouldn't work here. And I said, why not? I said, what was your impression when you walked into this building? He said, well, it's a bit basic, isn't it? And we got to grips that this young man would like to work outside. And I told him a lot about the Parks Department, and we made a link there. So that work experience is really key, and we've got a really important role here in the council to contribute to that. And then talk to other employers about showing them the way. Yeah.
Shall I take up the transport point? Well, it's WECA is needing to solve that, and it's about understanding
yes, it's about the bus service, but it's also about enabling children to have the confidence to use such buses and to be able to navigate their city. And what we'll come on to the home to school transport. So the travel training is something that has been invested and will continue to be invested in, and we become much more embedded within the preparation work that is done for children that have EHCPs, so that the skills that are needed and the confidence that are needed, those children will need in order to get through those barriers and get on public transport, is something that they will hopefully be much better able to do, because they'll be ready to do that. I can't quote off the top of my head some changes and additional services that have gone in for buses that would have to go to the Transport Committee. But it is because we're taking a how does your committee impact people approach. That's we're talking about it's council departments that have not worked in that way. So it is about changing cultures, about changing the way that people think, and that is coming through. And that was something that we will continue to do. But getting new bus services, of course, are great. I mean, I'm aware that there's one more that comes through my ward. What I don't do is look to see where it comes from necessarily, because I trust that WECA and those that are working within those transport teams at the regional level have looked at, analysed, and have put those buses on to best suit what people are saying that they need. So that would be, I think, what I would say about the transport issue. Yeah. Okay. So we move on. Katia, you.
I was interested to see what you said about motivation, because as a secondary school teacher, that's probably one of the hardest things to have with students if they're not motivated to work. And some of the work, I have to say, is very boring when you're doing GCSEs. I'm sorry I have to say that publicly, but it is. But if you're motivated for something after that, then you will put through with the boringness and the hard work of it. If you're not motivated, why would you do it? And sometimes some of the kids, I can't say they're going to be NEET or not, because I haven't seen the whole background picture, but you can sort of get an idea. Often their life experience is very small.
Yeah.
They don't leave their area, as you said, or very little. So again, one of the things is buses. The others is also giving them the confidence, and that's where youth and play work used to come in, to give them the confidence to go and see things. So when you teach one school to another, because I've taught lots of different schools, you very quickly pick up who's been around and seen things and how they can relate it to the work that they're doing, which makes it much more interesting at school, and who can't, especially if you're doing design technology. But the other one is that is a very strong need, is the work experience. And I know from my own experience, from my own child, that the work experience utterly failed him. And we tried really hard, but I just did not have as a parent, did not know anybody that worked because he's a computer scientist, and worked in that field that could give him a week's work. And it wasn't because he wasn't keen to do it, but nobody wanted to take him. And it was really horrid. It was horrid to watch because of his extra needs that he had. And once they took him, the one company that took him, he finished all their work in a day, which just goes to show that we have this idea of what that person is like, but actually they're not like that at all. It's just they have some little obstacles that you have to get over, like not being too many people in a kitchen. And things like that. And once those things are taken care of, and they're easily taken care of, he's fine. The other thing I loved, which is not much of a question, is when you wrote the career options, that they're not sure that that's obviously one of the reasons. I presume that they're not going into things. But I looked at the lists of things that they wanted to be, and I was really interested in that, because I didn't see anywhere an influencer, and I know lots of kids that want to be influencers on YouTube or TikTok or whatever the latest platform is.
Yeah.
And actually you laugh at that, but actually there's a lot of skills in that can be used in sales and all sorts of things. Yeah. It's not we just see this little narrow thing, but actually, because I remember on the playground, I took people in to do work experience, young people at that age group, and they were often in that sort of, and they weren't going to be play workers or even work with young people, but they loved doing the gardening. They liked doing the building. They even helped clean. They got really enthusiastic into that. And then they all came up afterwards and said, gosh, it's very hard working with children. Didn't realise. Because there were often children that used to be children and up on the playground.
Yeah.
But so I think sometimes thinking out of the box on work experience, like you said, they came into the office, even if they might never become work in the council, but give them that experience of being somewhere else. And yeah, it's enormous for them. It really is.
Yeah. And there are some fantastic businesses in the city. The works team told me about one young man whose attendance was a bit flaky. He was in alternative provision, so he'd not settled in a mainstream school. And they found him a place in BMW up at Cribbs Causeway, posh, swanky car seller with Supra Minis. And this lad was his eyes were just like saucers, and he absolutely loved being there. And the company were quite kind of, well, if we can mould this young man, this could be a perfect salesperson. And once he got back to his setting, he was really, he had lots to say and was excited. So that's it. We're unlocking it, but it is about bringing the employers to this work.
Getting the employers to think out of the box.
Yeah.
So I had one young girl that was totally interested in animals, and then they gave her an assistant that hated animals, and I was like, how's that work? And dog training and working. She would have shoveled and whatever because she loved the animals so much, but she wouldn't have done anything else. You know what I mean? So that kind of thinking out of the box is really important. So I'm very happy to hear that sort of thing seems to be going on and working. Like you're working on individuals as well, because they are very individual, everyone.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It's a personalised approach. Yeah. Thank you.
Susan?
So I'm not sure if this is a conflict of interest. In terms of the youth guarantee, obviously the youth guarantee in Bristol, in South Bristol, was it Hartcliffe and Woodwood Ventures, HWV, at the Gatehouse Centre, where I was teaching until recently. And I had a first-hand experience of what was going on in the current cohort at the Gatehouse Centre. Basically, we had somebody who was working there who was unfortunately not able to attend, and they rapidly looked for somebody to stand in and support the class. And because I'm not teaching at the moment, because it's school holidays, I was asked if I would step in.
Oh, wow.
And work with this group for the day. And I had such a good day. They were it was just absolutely brilliant. The cohort that they've got there at the moment, they were all engaging together. They were talking amongst themselves. They went to lunch together. And to see active 16, 17-year-olds coming together, engaging and doing the work and working together as a group was just absolutely brilliant. So I think for me, I don't know how it's always going to work with different cohorts, different kids come in, different mannerisms, but just to kind of have that kind of shining example. And I had a really good day supporting those kids. It's not much of a conflict because I have actually moved on in jobs. But I just thought I had a really good day.
That's great to hear. Wonderful.
It was just a fluky thing. I just happened to be in work. They needed somebody, and as a qualified teacher, they asked me to help. So.
But that's exactly why we're working in partnership with HWV, which is embedded in Hartcliffe, and HWV are also working hand in hand with the park in Knoll West. So, because those are the two areas we're really concerned about. So it's fantastic that you were able to get that insight.
Well, it was fun. It was good. It was good insight.
Really great.
Thank you. And Cara?
Thank you.
First of all, obviously, it's great that you're tracking down the children who've been outside the system. That's a bold move as well, because obviously you risk pushing up the headline figure of how many children are outside of education and employment. So I really applaud that you're going really looking for the most vulnerable children, even at the risk of giving headline figures that NEET figures have gone up. So that's really great. And the extent and the breadth of the work you're doing is, you know, reaching out to head teachers and understanding all the barriers is also really was really good to read about. It's good that WECA are also sending additional funding for this. I'm sure there's probably still a need for funding because there's such a big, large cohort of these children. I wondered if you are talking to the council's procurement teams because of our and interacting with social value, because 20% of every contract that Bristol City Council issues over £100,000 has to go on social value, and this is absolutely rich area for companies, big companies taking council contracts to be stepping up and playing their part. And I just wondered if you have a system for that, or if there's more the council or the committee can do to integrate you with procurement.
Really good question. Thank you. Yeah. We've got into the social value theme by working very closely with our Growth and Regeneration Directorate. And we actually managed to amend the planning system. So now every major development in the city has to pay into a levy. It's only a small contribution. This is where it's £1 million development, which helps us pay the salary of someone that will then work with the developer on an employment and skills plan. And that work has resulted in some great placements for young people, including young people on the youth guarantee. So that works. It's that social value. And we realise that some of those developers, whilst they might be very committed, they haven't got the way into the system or the programmes to know what was the best way to achieve the targets they were signing up to. And as a result of that programme, which is called Building Bristol, we now are, the commissioning and procurement team for the council has asked us to take a lead on that approach with all major contracts. So we're just having a look at that and how we might help those suppliers do the same. So we've got a bit of experience and we're really pleased to do more. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Jane. So we are asked as a committee to note this report as it's an update on what's going on. And absolutely, I am going to assume that we want to keep on top of this. And I think it's probably, it's up to yourself and your team to say the most appropriate point that might be, whether it's 6 months or 8 months or wherever that might be, maybe the end of the first year of the youth guarantee or something like that, but we'll plan it in.
Brilliant.
And of course, the work that Jane's team is doing also fits in with the transition age group, which is also that kind of we're thinking and looking at what is going on with transition for our young people, that do the pathways need to be tightened? How is it that those different departments, so it's the education department, the children's services, the adult social care, the economy and skills board, how are they knitting together to make sure that that group of young people, as they turn into early adulthood, are best supported? Thank you very much, Jane.
Thank you. Thanks for your support.
Okay, so that takes us on to agenda item 10, which is the home to school transport travel phase 2 business case. Now, this is something that we have to make a decision on. I'm just reminded, because this would be the first one for today. So I'm going to ask Gail then to introduce the paper, please.
Thanks, Christine. So the paper is seeking approval to draw down 523,000 of Transformation Reserve funding to be used in phase 2 of the home to school travel service in developing more value for money travel options. So this comes about because numbers of children eligible for this statutory service have been growing steadily due to the increase of young people within EHCP primarily. Alongside this, the annual spend then on homeschool travel continues to grow and linked very often with travel out of area where children are needing to go out of Bristol to access a setting and therefore costs are a little higher. So investment in efficiencies, improvements and new services will allow us to deliver a high quality and sustainable service going forwards for some of the most vulnerable children so that we can maintain access to education for all of them. We're setting out 3 strategic areas of work in our proposals for phase 2 around under the headings routing and costs, communication and demand management and technology and systems. And all of those together will help reduce spend whilst improving quality. The routing and cost work reduces the overall cost of transporting children and young people from home to school whilst improving quality. Communication and demand management will create a more holistic working relationship between home to school travel and the SEND departments at BC at the council that helps us to better manage demand for travel. And technology and systems introduces new technologies and review systems and processes so that we can increase our operational efficiency, coping with increased demand in the short term and reducing operational costs in the medium term, and then also providing a more responsive and user-friendly service for everyone. So the costs of this project over 2 years are 523,000, and that is planned to be drawn down from the Council's existing transformation reserve. Benefits of the project in terms of monetary value are projected to deliver a total of 733,000 over 3 years, ending in 27-28. The approved budget that we've got for this year includes savings of 130,000 that are associated with existing plan changes to the service. And then in addition, we have got 620,000 that had been underachieved in 24-25. So we have got a savings requirement of 750,000 for this year. We've got a separate electric vehicle fleet project currently in implementation, and that will add significantly to those savings, jointly delivering 733,000 in 25-26. So our recommendations are that the committee approves the drawdown of the funding from the Transformation Reserve to fund the implementation of phase 2 of our project. And we're also asking to authorise the Executive Director of Children and Education in consultation with the Chair of the Children and Young People's Committee to take all the steps required to implement the business case, including procuring and awarding contracts over the key decision threshold in line with the maximum budget envelope as outlined in the report. I'm very happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. So has anybody got any questions or comments about this paper? Kerry, go ahead.
I've got just so many questions about every aspect of this. Obviously, I'm a service user, so this report obviously doesn't give the full context because it's a report and you could probably write pages and pages and pages, and obviously you can't submit that to this committee. So I'm just thinking, you know, I'm sure lots of parent carers have also got lots of questions. So is this something we could have a task and finish group on or something? Because it just seems like a big decision to make without having more information.
Well, it's the phase 2 of what we've already approved. So this is the second bit. So some of it is about buying more EV fleets. Some of it is about improving the kind of technical interface between families and within the service itself. And if I need to look at the paper to see what else it was, but there are areas within the service that need to be invested in this is about it's a one-off piece of investment, and some of it will buy kit, and some of it will train staff, and some of it will buy EV fleets.
I think a lot of that is the questions that I've got in my mind, like with the escort service. Because
Okay, then ask.
well, like you said, like training and things like that, and there's just, it seems like a big decision to be making here without looking further into it.
Why? Okay, Katja?
In fairness, the first time this paper came through, I read through it in detail and I was okay with it, but this has given us a lot more information about what's actually happening, which presumably you've worked out far more since then. That's obviously the thing. I did have a few questions, and one of them was I didn't know what a parent portal was. I had to have that explained. But the second one I had to work on was the escort services, the training of the escort services, yet they only work possibly 2 to 4 hours a day because they're in the car with young people. I wasn't very happy when they said, oh, this will be okay for a woman in her ages of 50 to 59. I was like, what? And the pay is very low, so that's one of my real issues about it. And with that, how does the training fit into that? If you're only working that few hours a day, can't they be used a more rounded job that can do different things as well?
So I could answer that on the training of the escorts. So we have a lot of uptake of applicants for that, and quite often they're entry level. You know, they're people who maybe through word of mouth, they really want to be working with children. I really want to work with children in SEND and get into different careers like that. The training is around, there's a lot of safeguarding training. There is training, communication and support for children with SEND needs. Training in health and safety because they're responsible for that child in those circumstances. And the training takes part separately, so they are paid separately for the training. It is a term time only role, and it is only for the period of time that they're backwards and forwards. But we have, for example, we have had some of our escorts come across and join us as business support officers and continue their role escorting. So I think it's, you know, it is not a great pay for the role, and we probably will look into that. But why we are looking to recruit more escorts is that with more children with complex needs, we definitely need escorts to sit with them through the journey and take care of them. And what is happening, because we've had a scarcity of that, sometimes we've relied on escorts provided by some of the contractors. So we are able to ask for somebody to do the taxi journey and also to provide an escort, and that's both expensive and not as good quality because they won't have had the same amount of training as our own escorts.
That was the one issue. The other one is I didn't actually understand what a parent portal was.
Okay, yeah, sorry. So at the moment, so if you understand, we would get a huge amount of calls, not just from parents, actually, from schools, from taxi drivers in the morning, with 1,500 children to safely take around the city. We will receive lots and lots of calls during the day, and what we want to do is enable a process so that parents can contact us see where their child is as well through a tracking of the vehicle. So you don't kind of have to need to ask that, and if the vehicle is a little bit late, they will see where it is. Parents being able to contact us online rather than waiting in a phone queue.
It's a bit like a enclosed Uber.
Yes, yeah, something like that. But also that they can contact us without having to wait on the end of a phone call, because the amount of calls that we get every day is a lot, and that even though we've improved our call handling and our phone system, it's still not good enough.
Okay, so and that was I just wanted to know what that was about. And then the other one I wanted to know is if you've got a good system of drivers and particularly escorts, which is obviously I can see that's a really important role. Is there not like a time when they can be met with the parents and the children that's outside school or outside things so they get used to them? I don't know if this works because I've been told that sometimes they just come and then you don't know who it is, but whoever just turns up. And given that a lot of SEND children have a lot of issues with strange grown-ups and strange people, and I know that with other in school they would meet the TA from the next year if they changed TA, and there would be sort of some sort of interaction before they started doing it. And is there not some time for that to do? Because it just seems like they're really cutting the costs again on the working people, which is rather sad.
So how it works best, I suppose, is at the beginning of term and at the beginning when we procure a new journey for a child and put the escort on it, we are in contact with parents and carers, let them know who the escort is. The escort does introduce themselves usually beforehand, and as far as possible that escort will stay with the child through their journey. There are times that has to change and a new person does turn up, but for the most part we fully appreciate that everybody feels a lot better if there's consistent people on that journey with the child.
Yeah. Okay. And there was some issues around where the meeting times were. I'm still concerned about. Sorry, I'm going on here. Is any about whether there will be some children that will then not get the service because of trying to cut the systems and trying to get things straight. Because I know it's been a while back that I've heard these things, but I have had friends that have not been able to have the service because they had one school and not another. And I'm concerned that whenever we start going, oh, we have to cut costs, that we start cutting these things, or we start accidentally putting children that can't actually travel for 2 or 3 buses to get to a college, and it's not suitable for them. They might be able to catch the bus down the road to the shops, but they might not be able to catch a bus and a train to college in Bath, for instance, on their own. This is the post-16 one. And I'm just worried that there might be slippage in costs and that we're not making sure that every child gets what they need and when they need it.
Yeah, so every child is assessed individually, uniquely to their needs, and that's a huge amount of the work we do goes into actually contacting parents and carers and getting the right information for them. I think yes, this is about making sure that we are cutting costs and being efficient because the number of children that we are helping is going up, and so what we are obviously looking to run this as efficiently as possible. We're not looking to run it in a way, though, that means that we are limiting what we deliver for young people, because this service is a statutory duty. We have to deliver it, and where children are eligible, we deliver that service in the most cost-effective way, because the money is obviously public money, but also aligned with the way that best meets the needs of that child. We are introducing, so we have got travel trainers, and they are supporting young people. At the moment, there's 3, I think, training, but there will be 20 a month going through to travel independently. But those referrals are largely coming from parents and from schools. So we are actually not sort of asking anyone to take buses where they might not be able to do that.
Because I can see that from a parent's perspective, I can see that's really important, because if you have to keep taking your child to school, and that's not just my experience, but experience of friends of mine that have had children, basically they can't work because that's what their whole lives become, and so this has a knock-on effect on other things in society as well. It makes families poorer, which then brings in more services. There's a mental health condition. In one case, it was a serious mental health condition because the stress of it added to, I should say. So, yes, there will be. It's very concerning. It's a really important piece of work. But, yeah. Anyway, that was my questions. Thank you.
Cara, and then Kerry.
I see there was a public consultation around the changes. So, can you give a brief overview of who was included in that consultation?
Yeah, so letters went out to all current users of our service. So I they had letters, and we also tried to contact everybody on email, but not everybody obviously picks up on email, so everybody had a letter. There were, it was on the local offer, kind of all the usual places, really. We worked with our consultation team to do that, and we actually had 330 odd replies, I think, but with only something like 170 were people within the Bristol City Council boundary.
And Kerry?
So I've got a few questions and comments. So I agree that phoning up the council when you do or don't need a taxi doesn't work, because quite often the message doesn't always get through to the taxi driver, and then they turn up and then it just causes an absolute kerfuffle. And then sometimes the taxi drivers, you can phone them and say, actually, I don't need it. So it's just a lot of work for everybody. So that system really doesn't work. So I welcome the portal, but I'd be interested to see what that looks like and how it's going to be monitored. And also I've had a lot of taxi drivers, and I speak to them, build a good rapport. So a lot of them are private hire taxis. So they do the school run in the morning and afternoon, and then they go out and do their normal job in the daytime. So what will these taxis be doing in the daytime when they're not being home to school transport? And with the pickup points, I know that sometimes does happen already. So I'm not saying it's not a good idea, but I'm concerned about things like reasonable adjustments. So, you know, I live in a very big ward, and if you've got 3 kids that need to be in the same taxi and they live at opposite ends of the ward and the meeting point's in the middle, and one of those children can't get to the meeting point, then that becomes a barrier. So, you know, you're always going to have reasonable adjustments. That policy might not work for everybody. I'm still going. Sorry, phone call. And with the tracking system, has there been any conversation with parents and families, and what have they said about that, and do they want it? Is that something they've suggested or agreed to, or do they like being tracked? Sorry, I'll come back to my next one. Sorry, I'll let you answer that.
Okay. Let's start with that last one. So the tracking is of the vehicle. So it's not of children unless children are in that vehicle, and it's really to give. So we will often, maybe because of traffic, we will often have a lot of calls to say my taxi hasn't arrived yet, or have you, when is it my child's getting distressed, and that tracking on a vehicle allows you to see where the vehicle is and that it's on its way. It's kind of a bit like a parcel tracking that we sort of all do now. And then I suppose if there are some parents are more anxious than others in terms of whether their child has got to school, and you will see whether the vehicle has got to school. That doesn't necessarily, I guess, your child is likely to be there if the vehicle has got there, because they will have been helped off that vehicle, but it isn't a tracking of the children. I think there has been consultation with the contractors, our drivers, and all the rest of it over how we would introduce that, and we have. I don't think we have consulted with parents and carers specifically about that. It was, and whether it was in the original consultation, I don't remember this. And I really take your point about more information and how parents and carers can be involved in this. And really key to this, and in some of the report, you see that phase 2 of this programme, we really want to have Bristol parent carers supporting this programme by being on the programme board with us, offering challenge, offering the best way of being able to get that feedback and understanding of the needs of our parent carers and their children in Bristol. So I think we might not have it all spot on and perfect at the moment, but this programme of work, much of which has already started, is beginning to make some impacts, like the fleet, for example, that we have got this decarbonising the city and journeys for children. We have done a consultation with the families where they are using one of our fleet vehicles rather than the previous taxi, and they're really happy with it. They're really happy with, I guess, the fact that the drivers are employed as well by the council rather than being a contractor. There's you know, I think there probably is a lot more that we can do to make assurances and to also learn from some of the things that you haven't had such a good experience of. But this whole programme isn't about disadvantaging children or trying to, you know, cut costs to the point that children aren't getting a service. We want children to go to school. We heard Jane talking just now. We need to help children to maintain that access to school so that their futures look brighter. And we know how hard it is as well we're talking to parent carers every single day. We know how hard it is. Some of their lives are with, you know, other children and dealing with a high needs child. We really want to support that to go as well as possible. So this is not about trying to reduce a service.
So going back to the parent portal thing,
yeah.
So would that also incorporate the forms you fill out to apply for the home? Because I know they're a bit of a nightmare. They're hard to find, and sometimes you're sent them and sometimes you're not. And when you fill it out, you get tick boxes to say what eligibility criteria. And last time I filled it in and I was getting other parents to fill it in, you couldn't tick them all. So if you were entitled to them all, you couldn't tick them all. So sometimes your initial application could get rejected when you know you are entitled. So would it incorporate that, and would it speed things up? Because I think last year we were told like 3 days before the beginning of the new term what the arrangements were, and that just sent my family into absolute panic. So is this going to improve things?
Yeah, so largely that's what the improvements in in technology and our systems are about, is about improving our service. It's actually going to cost us money, not save us money, but what it will deliver is a huge benefit to children and families and for the service. So I'm not sure that we use an online form at the moment, don't we, for the referral, and it's on our portal. It's one of the things that's there's a improving technologies program going on in the council at the moment, and we absolutely need to improve that. If we can get all of that process on our current system, which is our case management system, we would do that, but I'm not sure that we can. So I think we'll need a slightly separate process for that. But I really agree we need an end-to-end process that you would have, wouldn't you, if you were, I don't know, something in Google, you would have something where you could apply, it went through, you could track where you were, that would be perfect, so parents don't think they've been forgotten. And we have so many applications at the beginning of a school term that we often do. Some parents are waiting until the week before, and there are also some parents, I'm sad to say, who haven't heard what, but by the beginning of term, and that's been the case this year for the academic term. We have written to all of them to say that we will honour mileage payments until their referral is processed, and we have also sort of routed their children up front on the assumption that most of them will probably be eligible, so that when we have processed it, it will be swift.
Well, you said that parents would be reimbursed for mileage, but if you don't drive, if we had to arrange our own taxis, we would still get reimbursed?
Yeah, so there are, we haven't heard that from anybody yet. So far we have had feedback from parents saying, thank you for that, that's fine, we acknowledge that. And we haven't had any of those parents come to us yet.
Councillor Varney?
Thank you, Christine. Yeah, thank you, Guy. I think you might have missed one of Councillor Bells's questions, or maybe I missed it. It was about our own fleet and what that fleet would be doing once they've finished their home to school service. Now, we had a briefing a while ago, and I think you told me that it could be, for example, used for Meals on Wheels. I'd be interested to know if there are other ideas of how that fleet could be maximised during the day. I just had really one sort of simple point to make is this is a statutory service. It's not being funded properly from central government, so we do need to find ways to be efficient and to make cost savings. For me, this seems like a no-brainer. You know, for a small investment, we're going to make savings and actually improve the service from my understanding. But yes, if you just wanted to refer back to the earlier question, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks for reminding me. Yeah, because actually that's a really good news story. So we'll go up to 33 vehicles, and we have already taken on the Meals on Wheels contract. So, because that's outside of school time, so we start running that from the beginning of October, I think. And then we are looking across the council, first of all, around where there's quite a lot of taxi spend actually across the whole council, and whether there are opportunities. We have a booking form now internally where people can request a vehicle outside of those times, obviously, and then we would match it where we can. That's pretty well only going to work for planned journeys, I suspect. So we are still exploring that, but we expect income from fleet to actually be a significant part of our savings and what we're able to put back into the service.
Yeah, one idea I just suddenly thought of, which probably you've already thought of anyway, is sometimes on planning meetings we have to make site visits, and we require a vehicle for that. Also with licensing as well, we do occasionally do site visits, so that could be a potential use for our own fleet. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to bring this to a close and go through the formal procedure. But I do want to reiterate, this is an investment. It's an investor save, and the savings that are outlined in this were in the medium-term financial plan that were passed at budget by full council. So what we're doing with this is bringing through that's already gone through the sort of committees higher up than us, I suppose, might be a way to kind of describe it. So I'm going to read the actual what it is that we're being asked to approve today. So it's the drawdown of 0.523 million from the transformation reserve to implement the phase 2 of the home to school transport, and it authorises the Director of Children's Education in consultation with the Chair of the committee to take all steps required to implement the business case, including procuring and awarding the contracts over the key decision threshold in line with the maximum budget that is outlined in the report. I move the recommendations. Have I got a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Van seconding. So I think we can move to a vote. So it will be either for, against or abstain on this paper. So I'm going to ask for committee members that wish to vote for this key decision to please raise their hands. That's 6. Those that wish to vote against this, and those that wish to abstain. So the 3 Labour. Yeah. Thank you very much. And so we'll move on to... Sorry, Shana, go ahead.
Could we have a loo break? Sorry.
I think that's actually probably quite a good idea, because I probably need one too. Yeah, all right. Should we take literally 5 minutes and come back then? Yeah. down. It's been suggested that as a committee we might want to have a briefing around what's going on with the home to school transport. So can we note that that's something that we can set up? I'm not sure whether it's on the work programme. I can't remember. I need to look back, but it may well be. I'm not sure. I'd have to look. So moving on to agenda item number 11. This is about the Children's Community Health Partnership. This is quite a long report. It's a huge, massively huge contract where the contribution is relatively small. So I'll ask Gail to give us an outline because this relates as much to the ICB changes as it does to ourselves. And this is information only because it's the ICB that oversees this. And we are expecting a further report to come back to us in the autumn with a lot more detail. But really, this is about us getting an update, really, on where we stand in relation to the changes within the NHS and what's going on locally.
Thank you. Okay, so this is information. It's an update on proposals around recommissioning of a large contract which is owned by the Integrated Care Board, and the contract is called the Children's Community Health Partnership, and that contract runs all of the community level services for children across Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloss. So it's a 46 million or so contract, and it was the ICB awarded it to Serona, who are the provider, and Serona subcontracts some of the mental health elements out to Avon Wiltshire Partnership, AWP. The contract runs till March 27, and there've recently been the ICB sought an extension on that, which has gone to their board and been approved, and also went to the Public Health and Communities Board at Bristol City Council and was also approved. The reasons for the extension are that it's a huge contract to renegotiate at a time of a lot of flux, really. So the 10-year plan has come in for health. There are reforms ongoing which kind of will benefit and bring us all together around family help, early help, that we could do with looking at properly and spending some time to look at how that works across the piece. And also Gloucester is coming into the geographical patch for the ICB. So there's some work to do as well to look at aligning or looking at how those things run parallel. So the contract has got 1.8 million of value from children and education. That's largely around things like children's mental health services, services for children with SEND, early years services. So some of what is there is partially statutory. Some of it is just services that we want to prioritise for children. And there's 11 million of public health funding. Public health are going to come out of the health contract at the end of that new extension in 2028, and they are going to commission probably with the same provider, but just across the three local authorities. They're going to commission on their own, not as part of the health contract. So how the information for you at the moment is that we are reviewing the services that we have commissioned on top of what the ICB commissioned. We're looking at whether it still meets need in the same way. We're looking at what we would want for that going forward. There are some things like, because it's part of a huge contract, we don't get the good communication about some of the services. And we don't get to direct some of the things that are happening. Our KPIs that come in aren't as we would like them. They are broad brush health KPIs. So there's a lot of things that we would like probably to look at, refresh and change. It doesn't mean that we won't commission it alongside that CCHP ICB contract. It just means that we will want to disaggregate a bit and be much more of a stakeholder in deciding how that money is spent. There's a little bit of a risk in terms of while we've been part of a contract with Public Health, they have been paying all the agenda for change pay increases to clinicians, and that will stop at the end of that. So, and Serona have also been slightly subsidising the contract with some of their adult services. So it means that we will need to look carefully at what services we put in, and we have put that forward as a pressure, as a financial pressure that's likely we will likely need to pick up. So there's a procurement timeline in there for you to see. There's a lot of work going on at the moment across commissioners, and we want to come back with an options paper later in the autumn probably, so that you can see that and make a decision on, we will recommend the best way forward, and then you can make that decision. Any questions?
Anyone got any questions about that? Okay, I just want to reiterate something like is this contract was something like 7 years or something, so it's quite a long contract. It's been running for quite a long time, so the needs would have changed, and we've got some updated information on those needs. So it's an important contract for us, particularly because Public Health have been paying for those health worker pay increases, and this is something that we will have to look at relatively closely, I think, and we'll come back in the autumn, really. I think. Thank you very much. So it's for us to note.
Thank you.
Can I assume we want to note? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. And that takes us on to agenda item number 12, which is the Sanctuary Strategy and Action Plan. So this is the draft Sanctuary Strategy and Action Plan. Takes us from the current year up until 2030, and it's about to go out to public consultation, which is why it's come here. And then it will come back once that consultation's been completed. It will come back in the autumn. But Anne, did you want to give us any out? Oh, sorry, Fiona, beg your pardon. Sorry. Fiona is going to give us just the kind of bones, really, around this strategy.
Yeah. So, like Councillor Stan said, this is really just for brief information today. We'll bring this back to November committee, where we'll have kind of further discussion and look for approval once we've gone out and gathered all the consultation up. But yes, the current strategy has expired. It started in 2019, so our sanctuary seekers and the service have changed significantly since that time, so really needs an updated strategy and an action plan. The strategy and the action plan is citywide, involves partners across the local authority, but our external partners and our voluntary sector agencies. So that action plan will be across the whole city, that we'll look to adopt. There's already been some consultation in terms of getting to this point, so local authority practitioners, but other city partners and sanctuary seekers themselves have been involved in face-to-face consultations and some online workshops to get the strategy and the action plan to this point. You can see in it there's kind of clear priorities and draft actions, but we'll really want to kind of ensure that we have good quality consultation over the next 6 weeks, and then we will bring it back for yourselves. I guess I should just say the action plan will be funded. That's central government funding, and it will be thinking about how we focus and how we decide together how that should be spent in terms of the action plan.
Thank you very much. And given the context in which we happen to be bringing this to our committee, I do want to just highlight some of the figures in this and put it into some kind of context. So that report identifies 1,133 people currently seeking asylum that are based in Bristol. So to give us some kind of context, I'm particularly looking at our media person, Year 11, 1 year group out of 14 school years, 1 year group this summer have just picked up their GCSE results. The number of young people picking up their GCSE results was just over 3,300 people. Currently in Bristol, there's 1,133 asylum seekers. So the number of asylum seekers living in Bristol currently is 1/3 of 1 year group within our schools. And that, I think, gives us quite a good context about the actual reality of the numbers of people that we are talking about when it comes to a population that's just gone over 500,000, I read. So it's a very small number of highly vulnerable and highly traumatised people that enables us to fulfil not only our moral, but also we have legal duties towards those asylum seekers that are living within our city. 81% are families that are living in hotels. And of the 1,133 asylum seekers, 689 are children currently on register with one of us in one or more of our schools. So that's, what did you say that was? 0 point something percent? 1%. It's 1% of the population that are at school are currently asylum seeking children. So to put that into context, particularly in the current climate, I thought that's quite an important sort of point to make, really. But has anybody got any other points? Shona and then Andrew, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that context. And I just wanted to also put a shout out to everyone who defended those vulnerable sanctuary seekers this last weekend, and who, from the actions of some racists who wanted to be in our city. So a big shout out to everyone who stopped them from being able to get to those hotels, which I know included some councillors. I just had a couple of questions and a comment about the draft action plan. So it talks about developing bespoke Bristol City Council staff training course on sanctuary awareness. I wanted to ask, would that be mandatory for all employees? And I'm particularly thinking about our colleagues in the home choice section, which the feedback that we get is sometimes the asylum seekers, sanctuary seekers, refugees who approach them struggle and feel that they're not always treated as well as they could be. So I just wanted to double check that that training would include all of our employees.
Yeah, and our housing colleagues have been part of looking at this strategy and action plan, so they'll be involved in the action plan and the planning around that as well. So yeah.
Thank you. My second question was about under the section of cultural awareness. I'm looking on page 194. It says to launch an awareness campaign to educate about the challenges faced by sanctuary seekers through at least 5 workshops in the next 12 months. And I was a bit confused about who those 5 workshops would involve and who they would be targeted at.
Hi, I'm Anne James and I'm the Service Manager for Sanctuary Services. So this is an initiative that's come up through the communities team. So they have a plan for working with communities around dispelling myths. So they've got quite a detailed plan, which I'm not aware of the detail, but it is based on the work they did since the protests in 2024. And the work that they were doing with communities. They've done some research with communities around feedback around refugees and asylum seekers and what are people's concerns, and they're building on that in terms of, I suppose, addressing some of those concerns. So it's a kind of sustainable programme, not like a little quick in and out.
So the workshops are those, you may not know the detail at this level, but so we think those will be for members of the public to discuss.
Oh, yeah. No, they are. They're in communities, so it's about neighbourhoods. So it will be members of the public in neighbourhoods. Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you. And my last comment was about further up on that page, it talks about establishing a befriending service for adults. And I wanted to ask, maybe this is some feedback to take away, whether instead of maybe establishing a brand new service, we could look to fund some of the services that we heard about earlier, that Tom and Samira represented just a few of them, and whether we could look at funding and supporting the services that are already doing this work rather than setting up something new where we may not have the same connections.
Yes, so we'll be entering into a grants process, and we're hoping that to be a collaborative grants process with the voluntary sector. So there's a group of organisations called BRASP, the Bristol Refugee and Asylum Seeking Partnership, and they already do befriending. So yes, we anticipate that experienced organisations who are experienced in working with befrienders will come forward to continue to deliver that.
And sorry, you said there may be some grants available for them to do that.
Yeah.
Councillor Varney.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that, one of the best things about living in Bristol is the fact that it's such a wonderfully diverse city. We've got 297 different ethnic groups from 185 different countries of birth. That's 20% of our population was born overseas. 91 different languages spoken across our city, although I can only speak 1.5 of them. And 45 different religions freely practiced. And I think that enriches all of us. It makes Bristol such an exciting place in which to live. It's culturally exciting. We learn from one another. And I think all our various communities live side by side pretty harmoniously most of the time. And our City of Sanctuary status, I believe, is an important part of that. The fact that we openly say that if you are in need, you are welcome here. We will protect you. We will look after you. We will make you safe. We will give you hope for the future. And I think that's got cross-party support. So I really welcome seeing this report come forward today, and I hope it will continue to have cross-party support, and I hope the consultation goes well and the public are really positive and engaged with it. As Christine said, we do have difficult times at the moment, and I hope that this consultation won't be hijacked by certain sectors of society. But just to finish, I was Lord Mayor last year. I don't know if you knew, but I never mention it. But I got involved in quite a few sanctuary events, and it was such a joy. I got to listen to some wonderful music from the Dovetail Orchestra. I went to a hotel where we had an open day, and the different groups cooked their local food, International Food Day. It was really wonderful. But really special was the Schools of Sanctuary event, and just hearing from children and their experiences, and it was so moving, to know where they've come from and how they've adapted, and just it's so great that schools are so busy, but some of them are prepared to go above and beyond to make sure that some children are given the support that they need. So good luck with the consultation, good luck with this report. It's got my full backing.
Thank you. Councillor Freeman.
Just going to very quickly say that we talk about City of Sanctuary quite a lot, and it feels like quite an abstract thing and a kind of nice to have, but this really brought it to life, I think, and made it feel like a much more practical thing that's going to have actual impact on people. So thank you for putting that together, and just to echo really what Andrew said, that I hope the consultation goes well. I think this is a really important piece of work, supporting the most vulnerable people in our city, and I hope that we continue to be a City of Sanctuary for a long time to come.
Okay, thank you very much. And the funding is Home Office. It doesn't come out of local taxation. It doesn't come out of our budget. It is from the Home Office, and like other cities, we have a cap on the numbers of asylum seekers that we are able to accommodate, and that is also understood by the Home Office. And these are the sorts of myths that can get halfway around Bristol at least, and possibly further, before we've all left the building. So I think it's really important to understand where the funding comes from, and that there's a cap, and who the people are that we are providing the sanctuary for, because I can't do the maths, but it's over half are children, and they're currently in our schools. So that's who it is that we are providing that sanctuary for. Thank you very much. Can I ask the committee note the report? And this will come back once this part of the process and the consultation has been completed. Thank you very much. And it's 25 to 8. So let's move on to item number 13. It's related, but same but different. It's a related issue, but it's slightly different. So this is about no recourse to public funds, and this is a good example, I think, of how children's services and our responsibilities within children's services towards children and the housing side are working closer together, because it's about people. Everything's about people. It's about people. And therefore, it's going to be this committee and it's going to be adult social care that are going to be leading that. And those other committees are servicing the people that are living in that accommodation. So over to Anne, who's going to introduce the paper around no recourse. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. So the No Recourse to Public Funds team is part of Sanctuary Services. So this is a small group of people who don't have immigration status, and if they have children or if they have care needs, then we have statutory duties under the Section 17 and of the Children Act and under the Care Act. So we provide a responsive service, providing emergency accommodation and subsistence. And at the moment, we spot purchase from the emergency accommodation that's available each day, which a number of different services are also spot purchasing from those contracts. And we would like to move from this spot purchasing into block purchasing. So where we'd like to get to is that we would like to block purchase between 70 and 90 units of accommodation, and this would enable us to know that as clients come in and leave the service, we're able to use those accommodation for the new clients that come in. So the advantages are better quality, consistency, better availability, and also the ability to control utility costs, because some groups of people who use emergency accommodation pay their own utility costs, but because people with no recourse to public funds receive subsistence from us, then those are costs that are paid for by the team. And if we can make block contracts, it enables us to much better manage really our relationships with the providers, including checks on those providers. So that's it really. It's a procurement arrangement. So it's not about budgets or saving money. It's changing from spending 2.1 million up to 2.1 million pounds a year on spot purchasing accommodation to spending a similar amount of money on block contracts. We do hope to reduce the amount that we spend. But we've put the 2.1 million into the budget, which allows us to deal with if there became a sudden surge in service demand and we had to go up to say 120 units, then it just enables us to not keep coming back to yourselves for permission. But we're aiming at around about 70 to 90 units.
Thank you very much. Any committee members got any questions or comments in relation to that? Shona?
I need to say I think this is a really good idea, and it should provide that stability for these families as well, who have already been through a really traumatic time, and we know, and it's been put in reports further up, that housing and stability of accommodation is one of the key things people need before they can start progressing in other areas of their life. We know from Maslow's hierarchy of needs that housing and shelter is a key need. So I think this makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I read the note that at one point, one of the providers attempted to evict up to 30 families at one time, which is just inhumane. So if we can prevent that happening again, that sounds brilliant. Thank you.
Susan?
My question is with the block accommodation, would that enable us to move refugees out of places like the hotels, which for me, for families, whilst we're using it, is great, but we talk about providing that sanctuary and that feeling of community and stuff like that. I don't see how families with young children in hotels is providing that. So it's not that I'm against the hotels. What I'm saying is for people to be integrated into the community and to be given that kind of like village, grow up in the village area. How would that work in terms of what we are doing to support them in integrating into society rather than being in like the hotel type environment?
Yeah, so Sanctuary Services, we've got different cohorts of clients. So one are asylum seekers and they're living in hotels. So we have about 1,000 who live in hotels and about 400 who live in, as you're saying, the village, the dispersed accommodation. They live in ordinary houses amongst, ordinary people in Bristol. So that's that cohort. This is a different cohort. So that cohort are fully funded and supported by the Home Office, and that's in the Immigration Act 1999. So it's all not local government that takes responsibility for that group. And then we have another cohort, which are people who just are no recourse to public funds. So, for example, maybe somebody's living with their partner and their partner's got status, and then maybe there's domestic abuse or something or other, and the couple have to split up, and the parent with the children doesn't have immigration status because they were living here supported by the partner. So there's different examples, but that's the group. So they come into children's services, they're assessed as having an emergency need, and we put them into a block contract. So the block contract will be mainly houses of multiple occupation, there'll be mainly shared accommodation. And they'll be living in those units of accommodation. So they're not going to be big. You might have maybe four households in one of those. So that's what we mean. So the block contract is that, say, with provider A, we might have 8 units of accommodation, but they're little units of accommodation, and they might be all over the place. So it's not like a block of flats. So they will be interspersed.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to, so this is a decision that we need to approve. So we are asked to approve the proposal to 4.1 or up to 4.1 on the block booked emergency framework accommodation over 2 years. It authorises the Executive Director of Children in consultation with the Chair of the Young People and Children's Committee to take all steps required to undertake the block booking under the emergency accommodation framework in line with the maximum budget envelope as it is set out in the report. I move the recommendations for this report. Do I have a seconder? Susan Collins. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to ask so we take this one to a vote. So all those that are voting for this proposal, put your hands up, please. That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to we're getting there. Moving on to agenda item 14, which is the policy committee work setting programme. This is the outcome report. This, as we know, is for noting. It's come out. We had the workshop. Seems like a while back now, but we had the workshop. That's been put forward into the report. It is by no means a kind of this is it and it's done. That's all we can look at. We may or may not have just added something to it about a homeschool transport briefing. I'm not sure. I can't remember whether it was on the list. But I'm not going to ask any officers to outline this for us. This is our committee. This is what we've asked for, and it's for us to note. Anybody got any comments about this? Whether they want, is there something that they've further wish to add or clarify on what's on the content? Okay, thank you very much. So can I ask the committee to note? Thank you very much. And that takes us on to agenda item number 15, which is Q1, the finance update. And this is for yourself, Hannah, to outline what's going on with the finances. It's both within the DSG and within the general fund that looks at education and children's services.
Yeah, thank you. So this is a report that has already gone to the Strategy and Resources Committee. And this is the Children and Young People's bit of that report, which is why it's sort of buried in a number of different documents. And sorry for all the appendix. We'll keep trying to sort of bring this out as clearly as we can. I just thought it's helpful just to give you some sort of headlines from it. So obviously we're at the beginning of the year. This report looks at Q1, and which is the first 3 months, obviously, and up to the end of the Q1, we were showing against a budget of 144 million in total, 2.4 million overspend on the revenue side, which is 1.7%. And I think, obviously that, any overspend is a concern, so we are looking into that. But I think given the scale of the change that's going on in the service, what we're wanting it to do is to settle down what that so that we can just, and we're keeping an eye on it every month so that we just make sure that we understand it's really about our forecasting. So half of the 2.4 is almost exactly half and half education and children's social care. So on the children's social care side, you've got placements. In the placements, I think there's two things going on there, which obviously are changing. This report is a little bit out of date now, but two things going on at the time. One is that we did see, we are seeing some children going into residential placements, which, as we know, has always been a thing. We've also got some children coming back from residential placements, which is why our forecasting needs to settle down, because when you've got that much movement, we need to understand it a bit more. And we are bringing a transformation report to the October committee, so we can talk a lot more about what's going on in placements. And you've got a work group, what do you call it, working group.
We've got a 4-member briefing on specifically on the children's homes next week. Yeah, as requested by Councillor Reynolds. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got that next week, and it's in the forward work programme. So, and then the other thing, just in the papers, there's a mention of unaccompanied asylum seekers, just keeping with the theme today, and that's coming partly because we have, at the moment, I think it's a logistical issue rather than anything else. We have slightly fewer unaccompanied asylum seekers than we are planning for. And therefore, because we've got the infrastructure ready for more, we haven't got them at the moment in the service. They will, we think that they will come, and as you say, there's targets for that. There's a cap on numbers there, but that creates a pressure because we haven't got the grant following the young people at the moment. So that's, again, I think this is about forecasting, so I think we need to continue to look at it through the year. And then on the education side, the two spends are home to school travel. And again, it's a forecasting question. How many children receiving EHCPs will require what sort of transport? We've already talked about the variation around that. And then the other one is education psychologists, ways you know that we have invested significantly in increasing the service in order to meet need, and that's showing a bit of a pressure as a result there. So that's the revenue position. On the DSG side, this report is showing against 547 million dedicated schools grant, in total 25.5 million overspend on the DSG. That's net of contributions from Bristol. And I mean, as you know, we'll talk again next time. We are continuing to work to build more places to support children to remain in mainstream as long as possible, to build more places and specialist places. All of the SEND strategy is all about how do we meet needs first, manage our resources importantly, but second. So that's the DSG, and then just to note that there's a report in here on savings. So we've got 14.8 million savings to make this year in children's and education. At the moment, we're reporting the majority of that to be on track. There are potential slippages. One is around health provision, and it comes back to the item from Gail. We do need our health partners to contribute to the cost of health needs for children and young people. We will pick them up because we have to sometimes because they're in our care, but we do need the health service to pay where that's a requirement. So we are in that we're in that discussion with them. We've got a stretch target on our Families First programme, so you'll hear us talk about over delivery. That's because I have a stretch target. I've got the savings delivery, and then I have a even better if target, and that's about supporting children earlier so that the crises don't happen. So because it's a stretch target, by definition, it's high risk. So that's why it's in there. And then we have got a children's home. And we'll talk about this with all members next week. We've talked about this before. There's been a bit of slippage on some of the children's home savings because we have appointed a strategic partner, but because we had a failed procurement effort, we appointed a strategic partner later than we wanted, which meant that they couldn't open the children's homes quite where we wanted. But we are opening a significant number of children's homes, and we have got really good evidence of really good quality provision in our own children's homes, which I think is important. So that's there. And then on capital, the report talks about 30 million this year. Capital, most of that is in SEND provision, providing more places for children with special educational needs. There's a bit of slippage on it. It's referring to a Cabot Learning Federation sixth form, which we still haven't had the go-ahead from government. That's the slippage that is referred to. It's 5 million at the moment. So we're looking at what we can do with that, whether that's part of our education capital programme. So Yeah, that's the report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, has anyone got any questions or comments about the finance update? Okay, so I assume that, can I take it as read that we are happy to note? And I see lots of nods. Excellent, thank you very much. And then we have agenda item number 16, which is the two areas for our committee that are part of the corporate risk register, which is the overall risk register for the council. And it's the two ones that appear. It's the safeguarding elements and it's the DSG. Hannah, is there anything you wish to add to the corporate risk register? I mean, this has been through...
No, I mean, safeguarding continues to be... Yeah. It will always sit on our risk register. It should always sit on our risk register, and I've just talked about DSG.
So are there any questions or comments about the risks?
That's set to March 2026, but actually we've been given an extension, so it's not as risky as it was.
Agreed. I've picked it up. Yeah.
You picked that
Yeah.
one up. Okay.
It's the internal auditor.
And that was... You don't set those corporate risk registers, is that right?
Well, they are our risks.
We decide, because I don't know, because we had the slippage in the long-term EHCPs, and I'm wondering why that didn't make a risk.
So we should look at that, and so it comes around quarterly. They come to our...
Your microphone.
Yeah, we should look at that because it comes around quarterly.
Because it is pretty risky in costs as well, because it might run away with the costs if they don't get their service in the right place, and there are other risks associated with it. So I'm just wondering why that's not in one of the risk factors, because it is one of the things we've got an issue with.
I mean, it would be picked up in that's all paid for by dedicated schools grant. So the risk in the DSG is all about high needs costs.
Okay.
And overspend. So the cost element is picked up in that risk. The needs element and the delays could be a separate risk. So
I think that should be a risk personally, but
yeah,
I think.
I mean, maybe the other thing is that we start to think about is that actually, do we need our own committee risk registers? Does one exist? Where is it? What's on it? Like all those sorts of things. And that might be something that we look to explore. Because these are the sort of full council stuff. Well, the whole council sort of risks. And there are going to be risks that sit just for us. Yeah. Okay, so can the committee note the report? Excellent, thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of the agenda, and we have 5 minutes before the timetables end. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I hope to see everybody next Wednesday for the members' brief that will be related to area for this committee, and we'll send some communications both about the terms of reference for the investigation and also the home to school transport briefing. Thank you very much. Thanks.